Hello, my name is Michael Pilarski and I work for the Sidhe. And the Sidhe are the ancient Irish fairies of legend. And we spell their name F-A-E-R-Y as opposed to the nature spirits. These, the Sidhe are not nature spirits, they're not the devas, they are another race of being. They're a very powerful, tall, magical race of beings that used to share the surface of the planet with us humans. They're our, you might say, long lost relatives. And the best thing I could say about who they might be that would capture the modern understanding is, many of you have watched the movies The Lord of the Rings. The tall elven beings that Tolkien portrayed in that, well, Tolkien was researching the Sidhe and the legends of the Sidhe when he came up with the elven beings for that for his trilogy, and that then went into the movie. So that is a fairly good idea of what the Sidhe are like. So the Sidhe once, as I said, once shared the surface of the earth with human beings, but war broke out, and after a great deal of commotion and fighting and enmity, the Sidhe beings said, well, we're out of here, we're leaving. As they said in Tolkien, we're sailing off beyond the sea, and they retreated to another frequency, another dimension of the earth, which is within the earth. So you might say they're down there. So the Sidhe have been living their separate existence from humans all this time, ever since, with very little communication. There's always been a bit, and hence all the legends and folklore of the Irish Sidhe and the Gaelic and Celtic Sidhe beings, the fairy beings, came about from these interactions, which have declined over the years. In modern times, not only is, as they say, God is dead, and there is no more spiritual world, there certainly are, fairies are all superstition or childish. But there has been a new rapprochement with the Sidhe, and they have been coming and talking to various people on Earth again. They're striking up a conversation. How can we work together for the good of the Earth? Because the Earth, we both live here, and we all need to help keep the Earth in a good way, because we're not on a good path right now. So the Sidhe have been coming back and making some connections, and so I'm going to share with you some of the books that talk about the Sidhe in the modern context. And of my large fairy library, the Sidhe part of this is a small part of the library, because there's not been much written yet. One of the best books, I think, to start, or the best book to start with to get an idea, is The Sidhe, Wisdom from the Celtic Otherworld by John Matthews. John Matthews from England. He's one of the foremost Celtic metaphysical scholars currently, and along with his wife Caitlin Matthews, they both work with they've been working with the fairy beings and fairy folklore for a long time. John was invited by an archaeologist to visit a just newly found megalithic site in Ireland, which consisted of this stone chambers in the earth, and it had just been found. And John was one of the first humans to go into this chamber in hundreds or perhaps thousands of years. And so he went in there and he said, "Whoa, this feels really eerie or magical." It was really there was a lot of energy there. He came home, and lo and behold, a Sidhe being came and said, hello, you just visited our place, and so we'd like to have a conversation with you and open a dialogue. And so John had these conversations with this she being over a period of time, and wrote down the results and what happened in the dialogue in this book. So here's 2004. So this is one of the first books in modern times. And then David Spangler published this book in 2015. He was approached by a she being, a woman, female, named Marielle, who came and had talked to him for over a period of time for some years, and as a result of the communication from her telling about their fairy realms, telling about the she realms, and then he being able to give her a human perspective on what's going on here, he came out with this book, Conversations with the She. David is one of the former directors of Findhorn. He's worked a lot with nature spirits and Davic beings, but he also, this is a more recent part of his work, is working with the she. So he works with many spiritual beings, has written many books. I think he has around 50 or more books to his credit so far. And so he put out this book about the she. And then in 2017, he published a little sequel, Engaging with She, where he talks further what he's learned since that first book. So 2 books by David Spangler on the she, and David is a great spiritual explorer. He really knows his way around the other spiritual realms. Subsequent to that, he linked up with Jeremy Berg of the Lorien Foundation, and they put together this oracle deck. It's sort of like a tarot deck in a sense, and it's a way of allowing humans to be able to connect with the she. And so we'll just unpack this a little bit here, but it's a carrying case, and then here are these cards, and this is here's a picture of, this is the frontispiece that's on every card, but on the back are various drawings. All of these were drawn by Jeremy Berg while working with the fairy realms, or with the she realm. So so at any rate, these can be drawn and used as a tarot deck, and there's a book, a manual that comes with it, with this deck of cards, that will explain, you know, what each one stands for, what the messages you might get out of them. And so they worked, Jeremy and David worked actually with she beings. So this particular project, this she deck of cards, oracle deck, is a collaborative effort between the she and humans working together to produce something that we humans can use. So very, very unique. Another recent book on communication with the she is Birth of a New Consciousness by Jaap van Etten from Europe, I believe. And this is, again, a relatively recent book. This is 2015. And here he is giving a lot of, he repeats or writes down the dialogue that he has a lot with the she, and what their world is like, and how they view ours, and how we might be able to work together. So again, another approach towards a human being from the she. And here's a very interesting book by a friend of mine, Rihanna Naard, and this is Awakening, Life Lessons from the She. Now, Rihanna is just, you might say, a regular human, just like all of us, and she has a family, a husband, children, and at one point she ended up being contacted by a she being, came and said, Hello, I'm your she husband. We've worked together in other times in the she realm, and so here is a woman who actually has a human husband and a she husband, and she has to sort all that out. So, but in the process, she learns a lot about she points of view and how they think, and she learns a lot about their realm and her past history with her she husband, whose name is Niall. So, at any rate, interesting. You won't find this very often. Here's a book from someone married to a she person. And there's a whole series of books by a man named Robert J. Stewart. Robert, or R.J. Stewart. R.J. is one of my spiritual teachers. I've been studying with him since he showed up at the first Fairy and Human Relations Congress, and knocked our socks off, you might say, and took us to the fairy realm. So RJ's been working with the she realms for decades, and RJ is carrying on a spiritual tradition of the Western Celtic tradition. He is one of the foremost practitioners of Celtic spirituality today. He's a spiritual historian, a comparative religion historian. He's written somewhere around 80 books. And I just picked this one as a particularly nice introduction to his work with the she. It's called The Well of Light, From Fairy Healing to Earth Healing. And this contains a wealth of meditations and visions and ceremonies on earth-based spirituality. There's a lot of material in here you won't find anywhere else, and he talks in here particularly about fairy healing and how they can assist us in healing. So there's a lot of practical information in here, and journeys to get you to these to the she realm and to having connections. So I go to some of RJ's workshops, and we go on journeys to the realm of the she. RJ's been there so many times and has so much connection there that you might say he knows the passwords and he knows the guards and he can get us in. So it's really been a great pleasure to work with RJ all these years. Now RJ didn't just come up with all this stuff, you might say, out of his own head. He had teachers, spiritual teachers in the Western spiritual path, and they had teachers who had teachers who had teachers. So RJ is just the current of a long lineage of spiritual teachings, mystery teachings that come to us from the very past. And so it's interesting that RJ is working with the she, as well as these other people I've mentioned. So he's got quite a few books, but this is a really great one to start with, The Well of Light. You can find many others. He has his own website, rjstewart.net. And the last book I'm going to mention today in this session is by Anastasia Nutt. And Anastasia is RJ's partner. They work together. They're a great team. And the book is called Unseen Worlds and Practical Aspects of Spiritual Discernment. So this book is sort of a guide to the protocols of the spirit realms, how to go there and be there safely, how to have a good sense, how to protect yourself. You might say this is a book on spiritual protection. And in a sense, we could say that all of us interrelate with spiritual dimensions there. So here's a really good book on guidelines in navigating the spiritual realms. So I highly recommend Anastasia's book in that regard. And so it's interesting to have a magical life and not just a life here in this physical plane. But let's all do it safely and cautiously, and look for ways to communicate and cooperate with the spiritual realms for the good of Earth and for the good of ourselves and for the good of humanity. There is a lot of allies for us in the spiritual realms, and it's pretty obvious that humanity needs some more allies. So in the future, I'd like to get together with Jeffrey and do some more book reviews, because we've got a lot more books here. A lot of books here that I really like, and I'd like to share more of them with you later, but only so much at a time. So do bear in mind that there's fairies wherever you live, associated with all forms of nature, and you can go out and talk to them too. And listen carefully and see if you get any reply. Come to the Fairy Congress, and there's lots of classes there on how to do these things. So be well and think well of the fairies and the nature spirits and devas. We wouldn't be here without them. Thank you. For further information on the Sidhe and the nature spirits and devas, refer to some of the books I've mentioned. Look up other ones yourselves. Do some study. Follow your spiritual practices, whatever they may be. And you can find out further information by going to the Fairy and Human Relations Congress website, fairycongress.com, or my website is friendsofthetrees.net. The Fairy and Human Relations Congress next year, June 24th to 27th, 2020, in the Methow Valley of the Eastern Cascades in Washington State. We'll be there with lots of really interesting people and fun people and fairies. Bye-bye. And if you bump into any fairies as you're going through life, be nice to them and say hi for me.